Thank you.
Great.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. So if you're just joining us, there are still some seats up front. So we're excited that we're such a popular session, apparently. So as Deb kindly said, I'm Laura Adams, one of the literacy consultants at the Department of Public Instruction. And I think that it's really important just to talk about what that means and what it means to work at the Department of Public Instruction. A lot of times, people don't always know exactly what we do there. It seems all mysterious. And really, what we do is we develop guidance. We don't develop any kind of laws. That's what our legislature does, our elected officials. But what we often do is we're required to enforce laws that have to do with education. And as I said, another thing that we do is we provide guidance. We don't tell school districts what to teach or how to teach or what textbooks to use. Those are all decisions that are made by elected school board officials and representatives of schools. But what we do is we do provide professional learning resources, and we answer a whole lot of questions. And we do have some resources for families as well, which is what we're here to talk about today. And with me is my colleague, Kay.
Yes, and I'm Kay Guberud, and another thing we do at the DPI is we collaborate. Again, I'm a literacy consultant on our special education team, and Laura and Barb Novak as well are both literacy consultants on our mathematics and literacy team. So we work together as a team. So again, thank you for joining us today. We are talking about literacy, the importance of literacy, and as Barb Van Haren mentioned this morning, the DPI has some resources available for schools, for parents, so we're here to share some of those with you today. And I would just like to start today by showing a video that I believe captures not only why we learn to read, but how we learn to read.
Evening.
Evening.
May I ring that up for you?
Hey, Tubbs, I read your book. You read my book?
Again, a tearjerker there, but a way that I think really gets the point across as to, like I said, not only how we learn to read, but why. Why is
Hello,
literacy?
I'm Denise Side,
Ooh,
the author of the Logic of English Curriculum and Materials.
excuse me.
Yeah. So again, the importance of literacy in our everyday lives, literacy and reading.
So why literacy? Why is literacy so important? Why is reading our new focus for that results-driven accountability work that Barb Van Haren was talking about this morning, because literacy is so much more than just about words on the page. Literacy is about being able to communicate. Literacy is about forming relationships. Literacy is about maintaining relationships. Literacy is about the skills, the communication skills that you need to get a job, those skills that you need to keep a job, the skills that you need to advance and accomplish all of your goals. And that's why, even though on that slide that Barb showed, that really showed that we also have math needs among our students with disabilities in the state, we decided that we needed to focus first on reading, because we know that reading is so much more than just the letters on the page.
So again, Barb talked about results-driven accountability this morning, RDA. And again, it's not important for you to remember the acronym, but like Barb said, it's important for you to remember what it's all about. And the idea behind results-driven accountability is, starting with OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C., in the past, they were concerned about compliance with IDEA law, which of course they should be, and we should be, we need to be. But like Barb pointed out this morning, we're doing pretty well there. That's great, that's wonderful. But still, our students with IEPs are not catching up in reading or in math. So that's why Wisconsin has chosen our SIMMER, like she mentioned again, like Barb mentioned, as our goal. So it's a new accountability system. We are now held accountable not only for complying with IDEA law, but also for helping our students to reach their goals as far as becoming literate individuals in our society. So please take a minute and chat with the person next to you or behind you. What literacy activities do you do with your children at home? Or as you're driving down the street, you're out in public, grocery shopping?
I'm not sure which one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Chatty groups, sometimes they're not. Good. Minute-ish. What do you think? Ah, great. Thank you. Sounds like a lot of good ideas out there.
So we're going to ask you to finish up that thought.
Does anyone care to share out?
Who's going to be willing to be brave this morning? Who can share something that they talked about or heard about just now? What kind of things do you already do with your children?
Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm a parent and I do a reading lesson every night. I do fast flash the ciphers. We read the story. We point to each word. I read very slowly and with a lot of expression. And then at the end we review the words again. We also do the vocabulary words. Reading the definition in the book, and also if there's another definition or something he can relate to more, then I tell him that.
So focusing on vocabulary, as Barb again mentioned this morning, the importance of vocabulary, exposing our children to lots of words, lots of ways you can do that. You can do that, of course, as you read and just be like, oh, well, that's a funny word, or that's a fun sounding word, and just talk about that word and then try to use that word again outside of the book. Flashcards, you mentioned flashcards, and pointing to the words on the page as you read. That's a really great strategy. Yeah. Let's see.
I am adult daughter, and so we listen to books on CD.
Yes.
And that's one thing that, because she didn't always recognize words, that she's
Yeah.
really
And we're so fortunate now with all of the technology that we have. If you're using an iPad or a Kindle, there's a free function that allows somebody, some kind of bodiless voice, to tell the story so that we can listen to it and see the words on the page at the same time. And there's great power in that. So there's a lot of evidence that shows hearing and seeing the words at the same time can lead to some great reading comprehension. So I saw lots of different hands. I think I saw somebody over here somewhere.
Yeah, we actually got talking about other things, so I'll tell you what I would have told her.
Okay. That's okay.
So my son's fairly young, and is just starting to verbalize it for the first time. And so he has energy level that's difficult to have him even sit. So one of the things that I've been doing for years is just sitting down anyway and reading. I know he's listening, because if he doesn't want to hear it, he'll come over and close the book. So we know we can
Great.
establish that, right?
Yeah.
Music therapy.
Yeah.
So we're using that to help him identify sort of, he's very good at hearing patterns and intonation.
Wonderful.
So using that piece. I'm just kind of learning on the fly. This is our only one, and I don't have an education background necessarily. So we're using visual also with music therapy, and not just letters, but also pictures sometimes. And then the iPad, various ways of approaching it through apps, because there's kind of different subtle ways. So those are some of the things that I'm noticing for him seem to be working, but it's hard to know without a lot of a feedback loop. So.
Yeah,
Well,
wonderful.
we can definitely validate everything that you're doing there involving music, because words come in lots of different forms, and tapping into the fact that we have words with music, and tapping into music that our children enjoy, and getting at words that way is a really powerful strategy. And just reading out loud, and they'll let you know when they're not really paying attention, right?
Great
So,
for building vocabulary. Yep.
It's hard to know yet, but
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
the car too, as we're driving places, we practice different things. I wish I could sing better, but hopefully he doesn't hear too much.
yeah, exactly. That's what I would
did
say.
the same thing. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
We were talking about different ways in which, without even realizing it, telling family stories.
Yeah.
Oh,
And we
yes.
all, for different reasons. But, when we heard that, we were like, oh, hey, we already do that, without even realizing the educational value of it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There are so many ways that we can build literacy skills that we're probably already doing that we don't even recognize. That idea of telling family stories, as Barb pointed out, is one. Yep. And then I saw a hand back here.
I was going to say, for building vocabulary, when we were talking, I said my two oldest, I have a senior and an 8th grader who are very avid readers and a wonderful reading level. But I remembered that the Heads Up app on the phone, we've been using that at dinner, out to dinner, to wait or whatever, and that they run across words they haven't heard
Wonderful.
before with that. So that's been fun. And then my youngest has a disability and he isn't always able to read those words, but he hears us talking about them and giving clues and this. So that's been a fun family activity.
Absolutely. So many apps out there, and you mentioned the Heads Up app, and that's a great one. And again, that power of listening and hearing words. And it's so interesting. There's research that shows us that oftentimes we can easier understand words that we hear that are more complex than what we could read on paper. And that has some really profound implications for the kinds of words that we use when we talk to our children. So if you keep that in mind, that your child can understand words at a higher level orally through hearing than what he or she may be able to read on the page.
Right, listening comprehension is often higher.
Yep.
And then your child will have those words in their prior knowledge, their background knowledge, and then when they go to read and they are decoding the word on the page, it'll be easier for them.
Well, I
Yes.
don't know if this is the right time to share this, but
resource. It's called Learning Ally.
Sure.
And that sort of changed our life as far as reading. And you pay like $100 a year or something, but you have unlimited access to really anything that's printed. And so my kids have, their reading level is low, but their comprehension is higher. So they were always frustrated by books because the books that their reading level were just not interesting. And so this way they're reading every night. I mean, and they can follow along in the text. So they're exposed to literature and levels of reading that are interesting to them, and it's just unlimited. I mean, we can get anything. It can be books, textbooks, magazines. So it's a really great resource.
So Learning Ally, which again is something that you pay for, but may be worth it. And we're going to share some additional resources with you that you can find today for free. So that's everybody's favorite price tag, right? Yes. Thank you for sharing.
Any others?
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
Great.
And when my son was born, we labeled everything in the entire house practically with a picture and the word and the
Yep.
sign. So it would be,
Yep.
like potty or
Yep.
Yeah.
door, stairs, bed. And over the course of the last 9 years, some of them have fallen down, but most of them are still up.
Yeah, and tapping in, and a few
Great.
people mentioned visuals and tapping into visuals, presenting the word and the picture at the same time and helping to make that association then between the fact that the word, those strange symbols on the page really represent that picture in a different way. And then I saw another hand in the back. Yes?
From the time that my kids were able to sit up by themselves, I would take them grocery shopping with me, and
Yep.
that we would have our reading lesson then, and I would point out all the different groceries that we get.
Lots of word activities and word opportunities in the grocery store. All those signs, pointing those out. For younger children, I see an R. Do you see an R? So many word opportunities right there in the grocery store. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks. So again, we talked about some things that you're already doing at home, and one of those things was reading aloud. It really is a powerful activity for your child to, again, get those words in their background knowledge, in their vocabulary, and then once they go to read them, they already have that knowledge. So reading aloud with children is known to be the single most important activity for building that knowledge and skills they will eventually require for learning to read. It's a very powerful tool. So you can help to create that reading culture at home by modeling good habits, by reading in front of your child, whatever it is, your book, your newspaper, magazines, the labels. Is this healthy for us? Should we be eating this? Let's read this together and determine. Provide a consistent daily study period without distractions, and reading to your child. Provide opportunities for your child to attend theater performances, musicals. Often schools will take those field trips, get students out. And notice environmental text and talk about what it says and means, just what some of you were talking about. And that reminds me, when my daughter was young, we were going to a Badger game, and we parked, and we were walking, beautiful autumn day. And she was about 7, and she asked, "Mom, what's a moped?" I said, "A moped? I don't know, sweetie. Where did you see it?" Context. She said, "Well, there was a sign back there. It said moped parking." And she decoded it, moped, right? So we talked about it. Oh, moped, motorized pedestrian. That's what that is. So just talking about the environmental text wherever we are. Ask your child's teacher for pointers. Keep that line of communication open. What are you doing at school? What types of materials are you using at school? Can I see the reading basal or your reading program? What types of books do you have in the library? Not only the school library, but within the classroom. When there's time for silent reading in class, what types of materials does my child have access to? Keep learning fun and incorporate it into your daily schedule, and play word games.
There were a lot of ideas shared around that, incorporating music, that read it before you eat it. That's, I mean, that's just great. And a lot of the apps that we mentioned, lots of ways to incorporate wordplay. And of course, lots of word games like Bananagrams, Scrabble, all kinds of things out there. Boggle.
Join the public library summer reading program. I remember that as a kid. It's always exciting, and you get to map out the books that you had read. Look for or create a little free library. How many are familiar with the little free libraries?
Awesome.
Yeah, great. And again, if you don't have one in your neighborhood, you could create one. You could be the one who would make one. If a neighbor has a little spot in their house, you could have children's books and adult books. Books that you're reading, that you're finished, maybe your neighbors would like to read. Again, showing children that reading is a viable pastime. It's a viable activity. And again, visit the public library often.
So there are things that you can do before reading, during reading with your child, and after reading with your child. And that's a really helpful way to think about it. And these are also things that are probably happening in your child's classroom. And so again, this might be something important to talk to your child's educators about. What do you do before reading? What do you do during reading? What do you do after reading? So that you can support those same kind of strategies and build on those at home. So if you're reading something with a title, that's the perfect place to start, before reading. So this could be a reading that you're doing together. This could be asking your child about independent reading that he or she is engaging in, but just helping your child understand that stopping and thinking about the title before jumping into the text has a lot of power. It sets up the reader to get an idea of what it is that's going to be in that text. It helps us to make connections, to think about the topic, think about maybe what we already know about that topic before diving in, because how many people just pick up something and start reading it? You always, maybe you flip through the book, maybe you turn to the back cover to read the summary, you look at the title. There are lots of things that we do. We never just jump into reading something. If it's a letter, we're going to take a look at maybe where it's from. This kind of gives us the same information. Where's this from? What might be inside this envelope before I read it? So just taking a look at some of the context, what's going to help us make connections and give us some clues about what's going to be in that text. And some other things to do before reading, you can share some strategies like, so as we read this, let's make some pictures in our head, let's make a movie in our head, let's think about if we were going to turn this into a comic book, what that would look like. Let's do that while we read. Again, that could be something you do together, could be something, an independent strategy that your child is engaging with. And asking your child to make connections. So again, starting with the title, does this remind you of something else you've already read, something else we've already seen, something else we've already heard? What? And what do we know about that already?
And again, these are important at all levels, all ages and all levels, with our children, our preschool children who are just beginning to become readers, our elementary, middle, and high school students. When your high school student is starting to read their science or their social studies chapter, really think about what do you already know. Activate that background knowledge, that prior knowledge. So these can be used from kindergarten through adulthood.
So during reading, and again, this could be something that you do as you read aloud together. It could be something that you do as you're reading aloud to your child. These could be things that you suggest that your child do as he or she is reading independently. So stopping in the story and saying, what do we think is going to happen next? Without even looking at the words, what do we think is going to happen next? Those who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. Those always work. How is the character going to solve this problem? How do we think Little Red Riding Hood is going to get to Grandma's house, right? Why? Why is this happening? What do we think is going to happen next? Those kinds of questions. If your child is doing the reading and you notice that he or she says a word wrong, or is having trouble with the word as he or she is reading, a really good, there are a couple different strategies that you can use. So one is just saying, did that make sense, the way that we read that? Let's think about that and let's go back. Did that make sense? So that's an important question. Another really concrete tip is let's go back and let's put our finger through the word. Really asking children to notice each letter in the word, especially if maybe the word, now I'm not going to come up with a good example off the top of my head, but maybe the word was character, but maybe they said like children because they focused on the CH and they just made an assumption. Let's go back and let's put our finger all the way through the word and say all the letters of the word is a really concrete tip. That's something that you can do. And I think it's okay to model that. Maybe you're reading and you don't say something quite right. Oh, you know what? I made a mistake here. Let me go back and let me figure out, oh, you know what? Oh, that didn't seem to make sense to me, the way that I read that. Let me go back and do that again. And modeling that, it's really kind of like unveiling that mysterious thing that happens in the brain. Because reading is invisible, right? It's an invisible process. And so it's really helping our children with reading is all about trying to make that invisible practice visible in some way. And so sometimes I think it can be really powerful to make some mistakes while you're reading and then show what you would do to go back and fix those mistakes while you're reading. That can be really powerful for our children to see. And of course, let's see, asking questions, as I said.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Laura talked about before reading, some strategies, some things that you can do to help your child understand what they're reading, during reading, and these are just a few things that you can do after you have read. Ask your child to summarize the text. Really say it in your own words. Ask your child to change the ending. You can do that. You can be the author. How would you like this to end? Or ask your child to identify their favorite part.
Okay, so lots of concrete strategies, and a lot of these were things that I bet you already do, that it sounds like you already do. So now what I want to do is show you like the big moment you've all been waiting for, some of the free resources that our State Department of Education already has available to you virtually. So I'm going to move over to the computer to talk about this. And the first thing that I'm going to talk about is a page that's called My Wisconsin Standards. Let's see, I think actually the easiest thing, sorry. There it is. So we're just going to take a minute and cross our fingers and see if the internet gods will help us to get where we want to go. Although this seems to be a little bit slow. So what you're going to find on this page, you're going to find resources that are organized by a weekly topic. And so 1 week, you'll see an English language arts, academic standard, anywhere from kindergarten through grade 12, and resources that would go along with that standard. What are some things that you can do at home that would support that particular academic standard? And then the next week, we present a mathematics standard. And so it's an every other week. 1 week is a mathematics standard. What does it look like in the classroom? What does it look like if we assess this standard? What are some things that you can do at home? And the next week, an English language arts standard. And so you'll see a whole variety of those. And now I bet this whole thing is not even going to let me move forward at all, which is a bit frustrating. Now it doesn't even want to play nice at all. Yes, they're organized by grade level. Yes. So, yep. And so they're, thank you. All right, let's see. So, yeah. That's what I think. I think I want yep.
Should I just try to,
Perfect. Okay, so now
should I just try to
Oh.
call it up?
I don't want to do that. Let's see what we can do. All right, let's see. And where is it? Okay, the PowerPoint on here.
It's in here.
Okay. All right, so she's going to get back to the PowerPoint, and I want to show you that website. And I think we're okay with time, so.
Yeah, we're okay with time. We're running down to see if they can do something about access.
Okay, no problem. Yep, perfect. Excellent. Oh, excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back out to this internet, and I'm going to see if this page is maybe going to be more willing to play nice with me. But we'll see. Well, looks like it might be kind of slow. Yep, down here in the basement of the Chula Vista. May not happen. And that's okay. Okay, so as I said, though, it's organized one week by an English language arts standard, and 1 week, then the next week is a mathematics standard. And so when you land on the page, it looks something like this, like what you see here on the screen. And so you can see a date, and you can see a topic, and a grade level. And so, and this is something that we tweet about as well. So if you're a Twitter user, you can follow us on Twitter and hear about these on a daily basis. But otherwise, you can just visit this page, which you should have on the flash drive that you received as a part when you checked in, and you have the address there as well on your page. Okay, so the other collection of resources that we want to call your attention to is this collection of resources for families to support literacy development. And when you enter this collection of resources, it looks kind of like this, and it essentially, no, it's not. So, and it essentially works like a virtual binder. It's like an electronic binder, and so there are different tabs across the top of the binder. And there's one tab that says for families, and that's just an introduction to what you're going to find in the collection of resources. There's another tab that says for educators, and there's another tab that says for instructional leaders. And so that just gives you an overview, the description of how you might use these resources depending on who you are and how you identify yourself. So there's one tab that just answers the question, why Common Core? So Common Core state standards are, of course, Wisconsin's academic standards in the areas of English language arts and mathematics. And so that there's a tab that provides some details about that, why we chose those academic standards, how those are different from previous academic standards the state has had, what it looks like in the classroom. There is, let's see, then if you go into supporting literacy development by grade level, by age and grade level. And then there are some concrete tips by age and grade level. What are some things you can do with kindergartners? What are some things you can do with first graders? What are some things you can do with second graders all the way on up through 11th and 12th grade students? So there are some real practical, concrete tips there. There are also some links to the Wisconsin PTA. If any of you are not members of the Wisconsin PTA, I would suggest that you investigate that. Ask your school if they have a Wisconsin PTA chapter or organization. The Wisconsin PTA also has a lot of concrete resources, both in the areas of reading and mathematics for families. Yes, sorry, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, my eyesight's not so good.
Nope, and I apologize, yep, because this is just how it will look.
Is there a link for if special ed for the Common Core?
The Common Core Essential Elements, it's called? Yes, there's also a link in this same collection for that. When you go under Why Common Core, you would see that. And this is a really good question. So we know that we have these alternate standards within the Common Core. that are often called the essential elements. And those standards are really for our 1% of students who are most cognitively disabled, who need some alternative education standards. And those standards are still related to the Common Core, still based on those same standards that all of our other students are working with. Again, with that idea of collaboration. But yes, there's information and links to that there as well. So you'll see some links in here to the Wisconsin PTA and some resources for assessment and how do we assess reading in the state, and what are some things that you may need to know about assessment in the state of Wisconsin. There are also some additional resources, like some literacy resources for adults in here as well. So that's what you'll see in that collection of resources. Let's see, I'm going to try one more time.
How do you know if there's an assessment coming up, or you know, parents, so I
Yep.
don't know when those occur?
This is an excellent question. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you about that, here we go. All right. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to tell you about how do you know when there's an assessment. There are a few assessments that are mandated by both the federal government and the state that happen at the same times every year. One of those is the literacy screener that we use for students who are in 4K through grade 2, PALS. Anybody know PALS? Maybe you've heard PALS. Couple people, yes. So that's an early literacy screener, and that happens twice a year. That happens once in October, and then that happens once again in April. For all children, 4K through grade 2. Yeah, I might ask. Maybe, yeah. I think I'd ask my child's educator about that, yeah. And so the other thing that happens is we have an annual state summative assessment of English language arts and mathematics. This year we used the Badger exam or the Smarter Balanced assessment for that. So, and that happens once a year, and that happens in the spring. We also have some additional required tests. We have a required test for English language learners that happens once a year, and that usually also happens in the spring. And let's see, we also have an alternate achievement test. Again, for those the 1% of our student body who are most severely cognitively disabled. And that happens once a year in the spring. So, right, instead of that state summative assessment, the Badger or Smarter Balanced. And I know that there's a session specifically about those state summative assessments later today. So beyond that, it's really about communicating with your children's educators, because you'll hear about a lot more assessments than that. And those are not assessments that the state tells school districts they have to do. Those are assessments that the school district chooses to do. And what I would say is, when you're having some conversation with your children's educators, it's really important just to ask, what kinds of reading assessments is my child taking? Why? What information are you getting? Why is this an important assessment for my child to take? And what information do I need to know about that assessment? What information do I need to know? How can I help my child advance? Is my child where you would expect to see him or her? And what are some things I can do at home to help get my child to the place that we would want to see him or her? So, and it partly depends on the curriculum, the kinds of assessments that you're going to see, and it partly depends on those just the information that a school district feels like they need. There are a lot of school districts that give periodic assessments. MAP, M-A-P, might be one that you hear about. STAR might be one that you hear about. Ames Web. These are all different kinds of assessments that measure reading skills and or mathematics skills. So not an easy answer to your question, unfortunately.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, in theory, if you have a child that fits in kind of the alternate
Mhm.
group or whatever,
Yep.
You would think that at least it's come up where we're developing goals based on data.
Absolutely. Always. Always. And that is a great question to ask. What kind of goals do we have for my child? And what's that based on? Yes.
So if the schools, I'm not familiar with the PALs, but we
Okay.
do the DIBELs, which
Yep.
I'm thinking they're similar. But
Yep.
so if they screen these kids, from 4K to second grade, and it's pretty clear if you look at those subtests and stuff, where there could be issues that need to be addressed. Does the school have to do anything about it? I mean, the parents
Yes.
have the information if they're below average in certain areas, do they have to
You can
implement a plan?
request an intervention.
So 2 things to know here. The first thing is that there's a state law. There's a state law. It's sometimes called Standard C. And the state law says that for any child who is between grades kindergarten and grade 3, if that child scores below benchmark, the school is required to step in and provide some kind of reading intervention. And that's based on the PALS score primarily.
And what if they don't step in?
Technically, then they are violating the law, and that's when DPI steps in and is like the big bad people and punishes the school district in some way.
And that intervention can look different at different schools.
Yes, absolutely.
But do they look at like an overall score? Because I know from my personal experience and from a lot of friends, my kids will score average or above average because it's a total combined score, like they're good in comprehension. But if you look at those individual scores, they're like not even on the charts in some other areas. So an average score doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. You have to be able to look at all of the individual tests
Absolutely.
that you're testing for. So how does that work?
And
with
this
the
is,
standard C,
yes, this is a really good question. It absolutely makes sense. So the letter of the law is about the sum score, but the guidance from DPI says that you need to look at the individual subtest scores. And the guidance from DPI, and that's very clear on the PALS assessment, the information that the teachers get back. It's very clear which students need some specific interventions in a specific area of reading. Because we know that there are so many things that are happening in the brain in order to make reading possible. There's so many different things happening that one thing going not quite right in one particular process in your brain leads to not being able to read well. And so then it becomes, really becomes, kind of this intense process of figuring out what's the one process in the brain that's not working quite right with this particular child. And there's no one right answer. It would be nice if there were. And that's part of the challenge of reading, is that there's no one right answer when we have reading difficulties, because there are so many things that are happening inside the brain to make reading possible. And so then it's about trying to figure out what's the thing that's not working with this child so that we can get that child the reading intervention or the reading help that makes sense for him or her.
So where are the list of optional, all the reading interventions that are possible?
Oh, good question. So that we're going to talk more about in a session right after lunch, and that's in your program. And the one thing to know, though, is that there are new reading intervention programs that are created every day. It's hard to maintain a list. We don't really maintain a list because there are new intervention programs being created every single day, and it's hard to stay on top of that. So we're aware of a great deal of them, but we're not necessarily aware of all of them. just because of the sheer volume of what the publishers out there are doing. But we will talk more about that, and it's a session right after lunch that is, let's see, going to be called...
It's going to be where Barb was. In the big,
Yes,
yeah.
it's going to be in the main room, where Barb was this morning. So that's where it is.
And the other thing about the intervention, like Laura said, there are many out there. There's old ones, there's new ones. But the main thing is to make sure that your school and the teachers look at the data, look at the screeners, and then look at other more diagnostic assessments and make sure that the intervention they're using matches the need of your child.
Does it have to be written somewhere that they have to, I mean, once they've identified the need, maybe they didn't do the testing, period, but if they hadn't and the child's clearly not reading, and do we have to have it written somewhere, or is it an automatic, we need to start this now?
That's a really good question. There's always some kind of a paper trail. There's always some kind of a paper trail that schools keep. And different schools keep that paper trail in different ways. But there's always some kind of a paper trail because there are always meetings happening among educators who are working on identifying who do we know needs help with reading and what kind of help do they need with reading, how are we going to work together to address that need. All right, so I'm in this collection of resources for families to support literacy development. And when I click on this yellow tab that says age and grade by grade resources, and so what we see inside here, first, this is the big picture of the Common Core State Standards, and this would be for the Common Core State Standards Essential Elements, or the Common Core State Standards, the other kind of version that we think of. And then we see just some information here. There's a link if you want, it takes you right to the standards themselves, if you want to take a look at what those look like, because again, standards are our goals. That's what we're shooting for. So as I said, at the State Department of Education, we don't tell schools what they need to teach or how they need to teach, but we do say, we have a state law that says you need to adopt standards. We adopt standards at the state level, and standards are also adopted at the local school board level. Most local school districts adopt the same standards that we adopt at the state level, but not all of them do, and that's okay. They can do whatever they want, really, whatever's best for the children in that community, and that's a good thing. And the standards essentially are goal statements. They're statements about what we want our children to know and be able to do by the end of a certain grade level. And that's important to know. And so what we decide to do with our curriculum is obviously informed by our goals. The instructional strategies that we use, the assessments that we give, the kinds of resources that we use in our classrooms, it all helps us to meet our goal of those standard statements. And so a lot of people confuse that idea of standards and curriculum, but they are very closely tied together. Okay, so then I can click on this sub-tab here. This is birth to age 4. And what I find is a whole variety of places that are like for practical ways to support literacy development in the grocery store. Click here, and you'll see a whole variety of things that you can do in the grocery store with children birth to age 4. For information about raising a reader, click here. For information about early childhood practices in Wisconsin, and there are some very concrete strategies there as well. Click here. So there's a lot of click heres. If I click on grades 6 through 8, for 6th grade and a list of some practical strategies, click here. For 7th grade, for 8th grade, so you can see it's by grade, really, so you can get to exactly what you need. We also have some resources to help you connect books or texts with your child, and those are free to any Wisconsin resident as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to exit here. And one more time, I'm going to try to go back to that other collection of resources. But we'll see. We'll see if it takes us there. So FACETS, of course, also has a lot of very concrete resources. And so check out that FACETS webpage as well.
Who manages this page that you're showing?
Good question. It's me. So if you have any questions or any suggestions, you have my contact information. If you came in and you didn't get one of my cards, make sure that you get one before you leave, and you can reach out to me at any time. I welcome phone calls and emails, so if you have any of the sites that are shared here in your packet or on your flash drive that are here in the PowerPoint, except the FACETS site, not the FACETS site, but the other websites are sites that I myself manage. So if you have any questions or any suggestions, please feel free to contact me at any time. So I apologize the technology is not working exactly in the most helpful way, but is there, yes?
I'm IT.
Yes.
Is there a problem? I'm playing YouTube videos.
Yep, so I'm trying to get to a site right now, and my circle is just spinning and not actually letting me get there at all. So I'm trying to go to this site. Yes, you sure can. So while our IT is going to help us try to problem solve that, in the last few minutes that we have, what other kind of questions do you have for us? What else? Yes?
Well, I wonder if you can recommend, or what you would recommend for sort of like decoding phonemic awareness and like fluency more than like sort of comprehension, and
Yep.
that's where I have a hard time finding good intervention, and
Yep.
it seems like it really has to be super individualized, and that can't really happen at a school level because you can't have one student for one teacher. So
Absolutely, and this is one of our big challenges with reading. So if you're specifically looking for some of those decoding skills, like I'm having trouble, my child's having trouble making sense of the words on the page and reading through the word, right, like we talked about, Reading Rockets is one site that I would go to. Reading Rockets has some real specific strategies that are available for free there that specifically address that. If you're looking for more of a paid program or like an additional tutor, I would look at Susan Barton's website. Yep, Susan Barton has an amazing website. It's very family friendly. A lot of resources there specifically for challenges with those kind of decoding skills. And there are Wisconsin tutors that are certified in the Barton method. A lot of times a similar program is called Orton Gillingham. Anybody hear of that maybe? So Orton Gillingham is another, it's a very structured program specifically just to work on kind of those decoding, making sense of an individual word at a time. So if
it's hard to find
yes, it is.
tutors that
Yeah.
are qualified.
Absolutely.
I will say, anyone who has like young children, if I could do it all over again, I would have bought that Barton system and taken off with it. I think it is just amazing and easy.
Yep,
Inexpensive.
very. And there is a way that you can purchase the Barton materials yourself and kind of be your child's own tutor. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep, Jollyphonics. Yep, that's a good way to go. Absolutely. And I know a lot of schools in Wisconsin that use Jollyphonics. Yep.
Can I ask?
Yes.
You had talked about
Thanks.
grade 3.
Yeah.
What happens after grade 3?
Good question. So when we're talking about assessments again, so what happens is once we get to grade 3, that's when our students are taking that summative assessment. In this case, right now, it's called the Badger exam or the Smarter Balanced exam that they take yearly. That doesn't start until grade 3. I will tell you that right now, our legislators are debating the budget. What our budget is what they're going to purchase for us in the next 2 years. One of the things that they're debating is about what assessment we will use beginning next school year. So there's a big debate that's currently happening right now. And so DPI will know if we're going to use the Badger again next year when the legislators make a decision. Yes.
I was wondering, in your resources for
Yep.
grades 9 to 12,
Yes.
do you have anything around there for motivators for the families that struggle with getting their preteens and interested in literacy or reading?
Yeah, that's there are some motivators there. May not be as well developed as as you would like, in all honesty. And I would say it's really about tapping into what your child is interested in. If your child's interested in Minecraft, then I would find a blog about Minecraft, because that's what your child's going to want to read, and that's going to help him or her succeed in the game. So now that's motivation to read right there. And then it's about communicating back and forth online about Minecraft. So that's what I would suggest. Tap into what it is that your child is interested in, and then go do some exploring. Where can you find some blogs? Where can you find some sites that's going to get your child into reading about that topic? Could be a band, a particular kind of music, a game, sports. It all depends on your child. Yes.
That's what helped my teenage daughter, and I struggled even with the teacher in 8th grade. I'm like, he would literally read books for her to see if she would be interested in them. And then what I found to help is I would actually go back and read the book a little bit ahead of her.
Yep.
So I could converse with her, build her vocabulary, and asking her those higher knowledge questions.
Yep.
That then I know she's understanding what she's reading and she's enjoying it. I think that's key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any reader. They have to love it, and
Yep.
they have to know what it's about.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I don't want to say what's the point, but you really want to build that base with them.
And I would say that that's something, I know we're like probably over time now at this point, but okay. So 3 minutes. So that's the other thing that I would say is, again, as Barb said, we want to keep our eyes on the prize. And even when we're working on those decoding skills, those individual letters and sounds and making sense of an individual word, the bigger goal needs to be so that we can all read a piece of connected text and understand a piece of connected text. And so we always need to come back to that piece. Other last comments or questions? Yes.
What are the requirements now from DPI for high schools to incorporate reading for kids with special needs?
Yeah, so they need to do it. So,
Yep.
That was a trend where in the 90s when our kids were
Absolutely.
in school, there was no requirements. I remember filing a complaint and they said, well, we'll bring in a tutor, and they were putting in sight words for high school.
Oh, that's awful.
So I just took it out in the community and started doing it. But,
Right.
That's that trend where I know families really are looking at what are the requirements so that when I go into my school and I ask those questions, I can ask it in a positive way
Yes.
and not fight with the school, but really encourage them to look at all the dynamics.
So the technical requirement is that from the state level, in order to graduate from high school, a child needs to have 4 credits of English language arts, which should include reading and should include speech somewhere along the way. So a lot of times schools, the way that looks in schools may be different, and schools can sometimes add additional requirements. So for example, they may require part of those credits to be American literature or British literature or something like that. But 4 credits is the technical answer. Yes.
Okay, this is more specific.
And I do know that we're pretty much at the end, so I'll be sticking around here to answer questions, to get folks my contact information.
Okay, so in order to get an extra ticket to get your prize at the end, you have to fill out this for each session and hand it in. So it's all on the same page.
It's in your folder.
Yep. So we are breakout number 1, and on the side, if you would please circle Salon A, because that's the salon we were assigned to.
Yes.
And then fill out the evaluation. That would be very helpful. And let's
Thanks,
say
Deb.
thank you very much
Thanks.
to Laura and Kay.
Thank you for joining
Thanks so much.
us.